A student at the University of Iowa is arrested after kicking over a projector during a Newsmax host's presentation on memes. Now that student is facing charges. I'm Angenette Levy, and welcome to Law and Crime Sidebar Podcast. This incident happened this past week, and it happened at the University of Iowa. Benny Johnson, who is a Trump supporter and a host on the conservative news channel Newsmax, was making a presentation about memes. And one of the students in the audience believed this was a racist meme. So let's go ahead and take a look at the offending meme, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
El grito ranchero es lo más mexicano, más que lo cual.
Now, that student, Travell Wright, faces a number of charges now, including disturbing lawful assembly, disorderly conduct, and fifth-degree criminal mischief. And this is all according to the Daily Iowan. In a statement, the University of Iowa told the Daily Iowan that registered student organizations and their activities are protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, as we all know. So the University of Iowa is not making any apologies for allowing Benny Johnson to speak on campus. And this has been a big issue on college campuses across the country. Conservative leaning people show up and then some people get upset. So joining me to talk about this is Aidan McLaughlin. He is the editor-in-chief at Mediaite, and Katherine Lizardo, who is a plaintiff's attorney and a big friend of Sidebar and mine. So welcome to both of you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
So Aidan, I want to start with you on this because Benny Johnson, I kind of know that name. This is not somebody that stands out to me as a big figure in the conservative movement. So tell me a little bit about Benny Johnson. Who is he? Why does anybody care about what he has to say, etc.?
Benny Johnson actually kind of has a fascinating career. He started out in the early 2010s as a writer, blogger for BuzzFeed, and became pretty famous. I think, people that were on the internet back then probably know him as BuzzFeed Benny. He was one of the most highly trafficked writers on BuzzFeed, and it was mostly because he would do these listicles that were pretty, clickbaity, not very, sharp, but they would often touch on politics, and he became enormously popular as a result. Then in 2014, he got accused of plagiarism, and BuzzFeed did an investigation. They found countless cases of plagiarism where he had just straight up copied other people's work, and he was fired and eventually landed at a conservative publication called IJR. And since then has drifted further and further to the right. Really, when the ascent of Trump happened, he latched onto Trump. Trump is a little bit more meme friendly than I'd say any other political person or politician is. So Benny Johnson really fell into that, became ardent Trump supporter, and now hosts a show on Newsmax and works with Turning Point USA, which is a conservative activist group, a very pro-Trump activist group.
And it focuses on young people. I know I interviewed Charlie Kirk years ago, and they focus on young people focused on or interested in conservative politics, right?
Right. So they have big presences on college campuses. They're constantly going around doing college campus tours. I interacted with them at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, and their goal is really to get young kids interested in conservative politics. And Benny Johnson, who has this, career basically all about the internet and about memes, has been going around to college campuses giving lectures and speeches about how to use memes in politics. And that's what he was doing at University of Iowa.
So Katherine, I want to get your take on this because as a lawyer, we've talked about First Amendment issues before together, especially on Sidebar. And I want to get your take on this because the meme, I can see how some people would find it to be offensive. I can see how other people may not find it to be offensive. But anyway, you kind of look at this, it's still speech, okay? It's a part of speech and expression, which is protected under the First Amendment.
Yes, that's right. And what's interesting here is, the First Amendment, as we know, protects the freedom of speech and also protects the freedom of assembly because this incident happened during an assembly of conservative group at the University of Iowa. And that's why the University of Iowa had to issue that statement that they also protect freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. What's going to be interesting is how memes now become the question as to what would be protected speech. And it's very fascinating. It's just natural evolution of the law where the Supreme Court has said before they only had to figure out, hey, there was a Supreme Court case where there's a shirt that had obscenity. Is that freedom of speech or not? But now we're moving to memes and other social media postings, right? Well, what's ironic about here is the reaction of the student student somehow validated how that meme was actually very effective in provoking to younger audience, especially college students, that kind of emotional reaction to politics. I went to UCLA for college, and so I saw a lot of people always coming there and trying to influence the impressionable young minds. I can see the concern in both fronts.
And I can too. For his part, Benny Johnson released a statement on Twitter that said, in part, "We often say the left can't meme. Tonight we proved it." While giving a peaceful speech to the University of Iowa Turning Point USA chapter about memes, our presentation, we played a harmless meme of Kamala Harris welcoming a bus full of migrants set to tasteful mariachi music. This is when a low T leftist strung out on pure soy snapped into a violent rage. I watched dispassionately as the libs' last drop of testosterone evaporated. And, he goes on from there. Poor soy is getting a bad rap out of all of this. I don't think soy did anything to anybody. I've had a soybean burger before. It's not a big deal. So, Aidan, this gave Benny Johnson, I'm a little skeptical about this, guys. I'm going to tell you that first of all. This gave Benny Johnson something to put out on Twitter and to rile up his people. And, it gave him some material, and somebody just happened to be taping as this takes place. So I'm a little skeptical here. Aidan, your thoughts on that? I mean, because this gave Benny Johnson something to talk about on Twitter and to make his point and, put it out there and stir up people who are on his side.
Oh, I don't think anyone's enjoying this more than Benny Johnson right now. And that's because it has the dual effect of demonstrating that the left, as he claims, can't take a joke, and also drawing an enormous amount of attention to him and turning points. It's the classic Trump thing of if you poke people in the eye enough and you get a reaction from them and then you paint them as hysterical. And it's something that Benny Johnson traffics in a lot. He's a big fan of what he calls owning the libs. And this is like a perfect example of that. So I think for him, it's a big win. As you said, he's been tweeting about it a lot in the last couple days. It's going to be a story now for, a week or two. And he's going to be able to play that video at countless more TPUSA conferences. So I think it's definitely a win for Benny Johnson, at least as far as he's concerned, because that's the whole point of these kind of memes. It's to provoke a reaction.
Most definitely. And so it is a win in his column. And he can say, look at the left. You say something that they don't agree with and they just lose it. They can't control themselves. It's kind of like just these, what I think are stereotypes of each side, painting each other as one thing over the other. One thing that does bother me, let's say this is totally legit and the student was really upset, right? And he just really was like, I'm sitting here watching this. I'm outraged. I mean, if he was so outraged, I would think he wouldn't have gone in the first place. But let's say he totally was outraged by what he saw, went up there, reacted, did what he did. My issue with this, and I'll bring this up, is that I was at an event at a university with Lara Logan last year, and she and I were on a panel together along with a newspaper columnist. And some of the students were really upset that the school invited her. They didn't want to hear from her. However, they showed up with posters to protest, and one of the students who was offended by her stood up and pushed back on her ideas. So he came and he watched and questioned her and really pushed back on what she had to say. Katherine, as somebody who, I work in journalism, free speech is what we do. So that's, to me, the more effective way to handle this. Pushing back on somebody you don't agree with and having that discourse.
I agree. And, as a lawyer too, I have to be open on both sides. And when I'm representing a client, let's say, that has a different point of view than majority of people, I have the right to defend them. And so when I say things in support of them, other people obviously get offended by that. So it's more effective to have a dialogue, or even, I know sometimes it becomes emotional and aggressive dialogue. But the problem with this student is he actually physically assaulted, I know, a projector, but it can also, but it's an act of violence.
Physically assaulted a projector.
Yeah. I remember that as part of Benny's meme as well, and some things that he's saying. That's why it's stuck in my mind. But it's still an act of violence, and you're not allowed to do that, And I actually read, and I can't confirm this, but supposedly the student has done similar acts of aggression against that organization of that school, where he would go up to the table and do the same thing. So he has very strong opinions about this. Again, I'm not sure if that's true in terms of him doing that to that same organization. But my point is there's a much more effective way to show that you don't agree to that kind of message. But I can see how, we're talking about young folks here with high level of emotions and hormones.
Yeah, so it may not have been totally spontaneous, but as you mentioned, Benny Johnson, loving it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I agree. Like, there's are better ways to deal with that. Reacting in the way that the student did is not really effective. There's countless videos online that always go viral when someone gets up and confronts like a conservative activist like Ben Shapiro when he's speaking at a college campus. And that's always a more effective way to deal with something than to do a high kick of a projector.
Yeah, agree completely. Well, Aidan McLaughlin, editor-in-chief of Mediaite, and Katherine Lizardo, plaintiff's attorney, thanks to both of you for coming on. We appreciate it as always.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us. If you learned something new from this video, please go ahead and click subscribe. That's the red button down there. And if you have any questions or any legal topics that you'd like me to cover, feel free to go ahead and place that in the comments below, and I'll try my best to make a YouTube video out of that. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!